Volume 2, The Legends of the Jews, compiled by Rabbi Louis Ginsberg, narrated by Michael Wright, Crested Butte, Colorado. The Favorite Son. Jacob was not exempt from the lot that falls to all of the pious. Whenever they expect to enjoy life in tranquility, Satan hinders them. He appears before God and says, "Is it not enough that the future world is set apart for the pious? What right have they to enjoy this world besides?" After the many hardships and conflict that had troubled the path of Jacob, he thought he would be at rest at last, and then came the loss of Joseph and inflicted his keenest suffering. Truly, few and evil had been the days of the years of Jacob's pilgrimage, for the time spent outside of the Holy Land had seemed joyless to him. Only the portion of his life passed in the land of his fathers, during which he was occupied with the making of converts, in accordance with the example set him by Abraham and Isaac, did he consider worth living. And this happy time was of short duration, for Joseph was snatched away from him only 8 years after Jacob's return to his father's house. And yet it was for the sake of Joseph that Jacob had been willing to undergo all the troubles and adversity connected with his sojourn in the house of Laban. Indeed, Jacob's blessing in having his quiver full of children was due to the merits of Joseph, and likewise the dividing of the Red Sea and of the Jordan for the Israelites was the reward for his son's piety. For among the sons of Jacob, Joseph was the one that resembled his father most closely in appearance, and also he was the one to whom Jacob transmitted the instruction and knowledge he had received from his teachers, Shem and Eber. The whole course of his son's life is but a repetition of the father's. As the mother of Jacob remained childless for a long time after her marriage, so also the mother of Joseph. As Rebekah had undergone severe suffering in giving birth to Jacob, so Rachel in giving birth to Joseph. As Jacob's mother bore 2 sons, so also Joseph's mother. Like Jacob, Joseph was born circumcised. As the father was a shepherd, so the son. As the father served for the sake of a woman, so the son served under a woman. Like the father, the son appropriated his older brother's birthright. The father was hated by his brother, and the son was hated by his brothers. The father was the favorite son as compared with his brother, so was the son as compared with his brothers. Both the father and son lived in the land of the stranger. The father became a servant to a master, also the son. The master whom the father served was blessed by God, and so was the master whom the son served. Father and son were both accompanied by angels, and both married their wives outside the Holy Land. The father and son were both blessed with wealth. Great things were announced to the father in a dream, so also the son. As the father went to Egypt and put the end to famine, so the son. As the father exacted the promise from his sons to bury him in the Holy Land, so also the son. The father died in Egypt, and there died also the son. The body of the father was embalmed, and also the body of the son. As the father's remains were carried to the Holy Land for interment, so also the remains of the son. The father provided for the sustenance of his son Joseph during a period of 17 years. So Joseph, the son, provided for his father Jacob during a period of 17 years. Until he was 17 years old, Joseph frequented the academy, and he became so learned that he could impart to his brothers the halakot he had heard from his father, and in this way he may be regarded as their teacher. He did not stop at formal education, he also tried to give them good counsel, and he became a favorite son of the handmaids who would kiss and embrace him. In spite of his scholarship, there was something boyish about Joseph. He painted his eyes, dressed his hair carefully, and walked with a mincing step. These foibles of youth were not so deplorable as his habit of bringing evil reports of his brothers to his father. He accused them of treating the beasts under their care with cruelty. He said they ate flesh torn from a living animal, And he charged them with casting their eyes on the daughters of the Canaanites, and giving contemptuous treatment to the sons of the handmaids of Bilhah and Zilpah, whom they called slaves. For these groundless accusations, Joseph had to pay dearly. He was himself sold as a slave because he had charged his brothers with having called the sons of the handmaids slaves. And Potiphar's wife cast her eyes on Joseph because he threw the suspicion of his brothers that they had cast their eyes on the Canaanite women. And how little it was true that they were guilty of cruelty to animals appears from the fact that the very time when they were contemplating their crime against Joseph, they still observed all the rules and ritual prescriptions in slaughtering the kid of the goats, the blood of which they besmeared his coat of many colors. Joseph, hated by his brothers. Joseph's tattling against his brothers made them hate him. Among all of them, Gad was the most wrathful, and for good reason. Gad was a very brave man, and when a beast of prey attacked the herd, over which he kept guard at night, he would seize it by one of its legs and whirl it around until it was stunned, and then he would fling it away of a distance of 2 stadia, so killing it. Once, Jacob sent Joseph to tend the flock, but he remained away only 30 days, for he was a delicate lad and fell sick with the heat, and he hurried back to his father. On his return, he told Jacob that the sons of the handmaids were in the habit of slaughtering the choice cattle of the herd and eat it without obtaining permission from Judah or Reuben. But this report was not accurate. What he had seen was Gad slaughtering 1 lamb, which he had snatched from the very jaws of a bear. And he killed the lamb because it could not be kept alive after its fright and injuries. Joseph's account sounded as though the sons of the handmaids were habitually inconsiderate and careless with their father's flock. To this resentment of the brothers was added their envy of Joseph, because their father loved him more than all the rest. Joseph's beauty of person was equal to that of his mother Rachel, and Jacob had but to look at him to be consoled for the death of his beloved wife, reason enough for distinguishing him among his children. As a token of his great love for him, Jacob gave Joseph a coat of many colors, so light and delicate that it could be crushed and concealed in the closed palm of one hand. The Hebrew name of this garment, Passim, conveys the story of the sale of Joseph. The first letter, P, stands for Potiphar, his Egyptian master. Samech stands for Soharim, the merchantmen that bought Joseph from the company of Ishmaelites to whom his brothers had sold him. Yad stands for these same Ishmaelites, and Mem for the Midianites that obtained him from the merchantmen and then disposed of him to Potiphar. But Passim has yet another meaning, clefts. His brothers knew that the Red Sea would be cleft in half in days to come for Joseph's sake, and they were jealous of the glory to be conferred on him. Although they were filled with hatred for him, it must be said in their favor that they were not of a sullen, spiteful nature. They did not hide their feelings, but proclaimed their hatred openly. Once Joseph dreamed a dream, and he could not refrain from telling it to his brothers. He spoke, "Hear, I pray you, this dream I have dreamed. Behold, you gathered fruit, and so did I. Your fruit rotted, but mine remained sound. Your descendants will set up dumb images of idols, but they will vanish at the appearance of my descendant, the Messiah of Joseph. You will keep the truth of my fate from the knowledge of my father, but I will stand as a reward for the self-denial of my mother, and you will prostrate yourselves 5 times before me." The brothers refused at first to listen to the dream, but when Joseph urged them again and again, they gave heed to him and said, "So you're going to reign over us. Will you have complete dominion over us?" God put an interpretation into their mouths that was to be verified by the posterity of Joseph. Jeroboam and Jehu, 2 kings, and Joshua and Gideon, 2 judges, have been among his descendants, corresponding to the double and emphatic expressions used by his brothers in interpreting the dream. Then Joseph dreamed another dream, how the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down before him. And Jacob, to whom he first told it, was rejoiced over it, for he understood its meaning properly. He knew that he himself was designated by the sun, the name by which God called him when he lodged overnight on the site of the holy temple. He had heard God say to the angels at the time, "The sun has come." The moon stood for Joseph's mother, and the stars for his brothers, for the righteous are as the stars. Jacob was so convinced of the truth of the dream that he was encouraged to believe that he would live to see the resurrection of the dead, for Rachel was dead, and her return to earth was clearly indicated by the dream. He went astray there, for not Joseph's own mother was referred to, but his foster mother, Bilhah, who had raised him. Jacob wrote the dream in a book, recording all the circumstances, the day, the hour, and the place, for the Holy Spirit had cautioned him, "Take heed, for these things will surely come to pass." But when Joseph repeated his dream to his brothers in the presence of his father, Jacob rebuked him, saying, "I and your brothers, that has some sense, but I and your mother, that is inconceivable, for your mother is dead." These words of Jacob called forth a reproof from God. He said, "Because of this your descendants will in time to come seek to hinder Jeremiah in delivering his prophecies." Jacob may be excused. He had spoken in this way only in order to avert the envy and hate of his brothers from Joseph. But they envied him and hated him because they knew that the interpretation of the dream by Jacob would be realized. Joseph cast into the pit. Some time later, the brothers of Joseph led their father's flocks to the pastures of Shechem, intending to take their ease and pleasure there. They stayed away a long time, and no tidings of them were heard. Jacob began to be anxious about the fate of his sons. He feared that a war had broken out between them and the people of Shechem, and he resolved to send Joseph to them and have him bring word again whether or not it was well with his brothers. Jacob also desired to know about the flocks, for it is a duty to concern oneself about the welfare of anything from which one derives profit. Though Joseph knew that the hatred of his brothers might bring on unpleasant adventures, yet he, in filial reverence, declared himself ready to go on his father's errand. Later, whenever Jacob remembered his dear son's willing spirit, the recollection stabbed him to the heart. He would say to himself, "You knew the hatred of your brothers, and yet you said, 'Here I am, I will go.'" Jacob sent Joseph with the injunction that he journey only by daylight, saying furthermore, "Go now, see whether it be well with your brothers, and well with the flock, and send me word." An unconscious prophecy. He did not say that he expected to see Joseph again, but only to have word from him. Since the covenant of the pieces, God had resolved, on account of Abraham's doubting question, that Jacob and his family should go down to Egypt to dwell there. The preference shown to Joseph by his father, leading finally to the sale of Joseph and his establishment in Egypt, were but disguised means created by God, instead of executing his wish directly by carrying Jacob down into Egypt as a captive. Joseph reached Shechem, where he expected to find his brothers. Shechem was always a place of ill omen for Jacob and his seed. There, Dinah was dishonored. There, the 10 tribes of Israel rebelled against the house of David, while Rehoboam ruled in Jerusalem, and there, Jeroboam was installed as king. Not finding his brothers and the herd in Shechem, Joseph continued his journey in the direction of the next pasturing place, but he lost his way in the wilderness. Gabriel, in human shape, appeared to him and asked, "What do you seek?" And he replied, "I seek my brothers." Then the angel replied, "Your brothers have given up the divine qualities of love and mercy." But, through a prophetic revelation, they learned that the Hivites were preparing to make war on them, and they therefore departed to go to Dothan. And they had to leave this place for other reasons too. For I heard, while I was standing behind the curtain that veils the divine throne, that this day the Egyptian bondage would begin, and you would be the first to be subjugated to it." Then Gabriel led Joseph to Dothan. When his brothers saw him from afar off, they conspired against him to slay him. Their first plan was to set dogs on him. Simon then spoke to Levi, "Behold, the master of dreams comes, I suppose with a new dream. He, whose descendant Jeroboam will introduce the worship of Baal. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, that we may see what becomes of his dreams." But God spoke, "You say, 'We shall see what will become of his dreams,' and I say likewise, 'We shall see, and the future shall show whose word will stand, yours or mine.'" Simon and Gad then set about to kill Joseph, and he fell on his face and entreated them, "Have mercy with me. Have mercy with me, my brothers. Have pity on the heart of my father, Jacob. Lay not your hands on me to spill innocent blood, for I have done no evil to you. But if I have done evil to you, then chastise me, but do not kill me for the sake of our father, Jacob." These words touched Zebulun, and he began to lament and weep. And the wailing of Joseph rose up together with his brothers, and when Simon and Gad raised their hands against him to execute their evil design, Joseph took refuge behind Zebulun, and supplicated his brothers to have mercy on him. Then Reuben arose, and he said, "Brothers, let us not kill him, but let us cast him into one of the dry pits, which our fathers dug without finding water." That was due to the providence of God. He had hindered the water from rising in them in order that Joseph's rescue might be accomplished, and the pits remained dry until Joseph was safe in the hands of the Ishmaelites. Reuben had several reasons for interceding on behalf of Joseph. He knew that he, as the oldest of the brothers, would be held responsible by their father if any evil befell on Joseph. Besides, Reuben was grateful to Joseph for having reckoned him among the 11 sons of Jacob in narrating his dream of the sun, moon, and stars. Since his disrespectful behavior towards Jacob, he had not thought himself worthy of being considered one of his sons. First, Reuben tried to restrain his brothers from their purpose, and he addressed them in words full of love and compassion. But when he saw that neither words nor entreaties would change their intention, he begged them, saying, "My brothers, at least hear me in respect of this, that you be not so wicked and cruel as to kill him. Lay no hand on your brother, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, and let him perish there." Then Reuben went away from his brothers and hid in the mountains, so that he might be able to go back in a favorable moment and draw Joseph back from the pit. He hoped his reward would be pardon for the transgression he had committed against Jacob. His good intention was frustrated, yet Reuben was rewarded by God, for God gives a recompense not only for good deeds, but for good intentions as well. He was the first of the brothers of Joseph to make an attempt to save him. So the city of Bezor was the first of the cities of refuge appointed to safeguard the life of the innocent that seek help. Furthermore, God spoke to Reuben, saying, "As you were the first to endeavor to restore a child to his father, so Hosea, one of your descendants, shall be the first to endeavor to lead Israel back to his heavenly Father." The brothers accepted Reuben's proposition. Simon seized Joseph and cast him into a pit swarming with snakes and scorpions, besides which was another pit filled with offal. As though this was not torture enough, Simon told his brothers to fling great stones at Joseph. In his later dealings with his brother Simon, Joseph showed all the forgiving charitableness of his nature. When Simon was held in Egypt as a hostage, Joseph, so far from bearing him a grudge, ordered stuffed poultry to be set before him at all meals. Not satisfied with exposing Joseph to the snakes and scorpions, his brothers had stripped him bare before they flung him into the pit. They took off his coat of many colors, his upper garment, his breeches, and his shirt. However, the reptiles could do him no harm. God heard his cry of distress and kept them in hiding in the clefts and the holes, and they could not come near him. From the depths of the pit, Joseph appealed to his brothers, saying, "O my brothers, what have I done to you, and what is my transgression? Why are you not afraid before God on account of your treatment of me? Am I not flesh of your flesh, and bone of your bone? Jacob, your father, is he not also my father? Why do you act so toward me? And how will you be able to show your faces before Jacob? O Judah, Reuben, Simon, Levi, my brothers, deliver me, I pray you, from the dark place into which you have thrown me. Though I committed trespasses against you, yet you are children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were compassionate, gave food to the hungry, clothed the naked. How then can you withhold your pity from your own brother, your own flesh and bone? And though I sinned against you, you must hear my petition for the sake of my father. Oh, that my father knew what my brothers are doing to me, and what they spoke to me." To avoid hearing Jacob's weeping and cries of distress, his brothers passed on from the pit and stood at a bowshot's distance. The only one among them that showed any pity was Zebulun. For 2 days and 2 nights no food passed his lips on account of his grief over the fate of Joseph, who had to spend 3 days and 3 nights in the pit before he was sold. During this period, Zebulun was charged by his brothers to keep watch at the pit. He was chosen to stand guard because he took no part in the meals. Part of the time, Judah also refrained from eating with the rest and took turns at watching, because he feared Simon and Gad might jump down into the pit and put an end to Joseph's life. While Joseph was languishing so, his brothers determined to kill him. They would finish their first meal, they said, and then they would fetch him forth and slay him. When they were done eating, they attempted to say grace, but Judah remonstrated with them. "We are about to take the life of a human being, and yet would bless God? That is not a blessing, that is condemning the Lord. What profit is it if we kill our brother? The only thing we will receive is punishment from God. I have good counsel to give you. Yonder comes a traveling company of Ishmaelites on the way to Egypt. Come, we will sell him to the Ishmaelites, and not let our hand be on him. The Ishmaelites will take him with them on their journeyings, and he will be lost among the peoples of the earth. Let us follow the custom of former days, for Canaan too, the son of Ham, was made a slave for his evil deeds, and so we will do with our brother Joseph." While the brothers of Joseph were deliberating on his fate, 7 Midianite merchantmen passed near the pit. They noticed that many birds were circling above it, and they assumed there must be water there, and being thirsty, they made a halt in order to refresh themselves. When they came close, they heard Joseph screaming and wailing. They looked down into the pit and saw a youth of beautiful figure and comely appearance. They called to him, saying, "Who are you? Who brought you here, and who cast you into this pit?" They all joined together and dragged him up and took him along with them as they continued on their journey. They had to pass his brothers, who called out to the Midianites, "Why have you done such a thing, to steal our slave and carry him away with you? We threw the lad into the pit because he was disobedient. Now return our slave to us." The Midianites replied, "What? This lad you say is your slave, your servant? More likely it is you that are the slaves of him, for in beauty of form, in pleasant looks, and fair appearance, he excels you. Why then do you speak lies to us? We will not give ear to your words, nor believe you, for we found the lad in the wilderness in a pit, and we took him out, and we will carry him away with us on our journey." But the sons of Jacob insisted, "Restore our slave to us, or meet death at the edge of the sword." Unafraid, the Midianites drew their weapons, and amid war whoops they prepared to enter into combat with the sons of Jacob. Then Simon rose up, and with bared sword he sprang on the Midianites, at the same time uttering a cry that made the earth reverberate. The Midianites fell down in great consternation, and Simon said, I am Simon, son of the Hebrew Jacob, who destroyed the city of Shechem alone and unaided, and together with my brothers I destroyed the cities of the Amorites. If it is not true that all the Midianites, your brothers, united with all the Canaanites to fight with me, and could not hold out against me, the God of Abraham can strike me down. Now, restore the boy you took from us, or else I will give your flesh to the fowls of the air and the beasts of the field. The Midianites were now greatly afraid of Simon, and terrified and abashed they spoke to the sons of Jacob with little courage. Said you not that you cast this lad into the pit because he was of a rebellious spirit? What now will you do with an insubordinate slave? Rather, sell him to us. We are ready to pay any price you desire. This speech was part of the purpose of God. He had put it into the hearts of the Midianites to insist on possessing Joseph, that he might not remain with his brothers and be killed by them. The brothers assented, and Joseph was sold as a slave while they sat over a meal. God spoke, saying, Over a meal did you sell your brother, and thus shall Ahasuerus sell your descendants to Haman over a meal. And because you have sold Joseph to be a slave, therefore you shall say year after year, Slaves we are to Pharaoh in Egypt. The price paid for Joseph by the Midianites was 20 pieces of silver, enough for a pair of shoes for each of his brothers. Thus, they sold the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes. For so handsome a youth as Joseph, the sum paid was too low by far, but his appearance had been greatly changed by the horrible anguish he had endured in the pit with the snakes and the scorpions. Also he had lost his ruddy complexion, and he looked sallow and sickly, and the Midianites were justified in paying a small sum for him. The merchantmen had come on Joseph naked in the pit, for his brothers had stripped him of all of his clothes. That he might not appear before men in an unseemly condition, God sent Gabriel down to him, and the angel enlarged the amulet hanging from Joseph's neck until it was a garment that covered him entirely. Joseph's brothers were watching him as he departed with the Midianites, and when they saw him with these clothes, they cried after them, Give us his clothing! We sold him naked without clothes. His owners refused to yield to their demand, but they agreed to reimburse the brothers with 4 pairs of shoes, and Joseph kept his garment, the same in which he was arrayed when he arrived in Egypt and was sold to Potiphar, the same in which he was locked up in prison and appeared before Pharaoh, and the same he wore when he was ruler over Egypt. As an atonement for the 20 pieces of silver taken by his brothers in exchange for Joseph, God commanded that every firstborn son shall be redeemed by the priest with an equal amount, and also every Israelite must pay annually to the sanctuary as much as fell to each of the brothers for his share. The brothers of Joseph bought shoes for the money, for they said, We will not eat it, because it is the price of the blood of our brother, but we will tread on him, remembering that he spoke he would have dominion over us. We've seen what becomes of his dreams. And for this reason the ordinance has been commanded that he who refuses to raise up a name in Israel to his brother that has died without having a son shall have his shoe taken from off his foot and his face be spat on. Joseph's brothers refused to do anything to preserve his life, and therefore the Lord took the shoes from their feet. For when they went down to Egypt, the slaves of Joseph took their shoes off their feet as they entered the gates, and they prostrated themselves before Joseph as before Pharaoh. And as they lay prostrate, they were spat on and put to shame before the Egyptians. The Midianites were on their journey to Gilead, but they soon regretted the purchase they had made. They feared that Joseph had been stolen in the land of the Hebrews and sold to them as a slave, and if his kinsmen should find him with them, death would be inflicted on them for the abduction of a free man. The high-handed manner of the sons of Jacob confirmed their suspicion that they might be capable of man theft. Their wicked deed would explain also why they accepted so small a sum in exchange for Joseph. While discussing these points, they saw coming their way the traveling company of Ishmaelites that had been observed earlier by the sons of Jacob, and they determined to dispose of Joseph to them, that they might at least not lose the price they had paid, and might escape the danger of being made captives for the crime of kidnapping a man. So the Ishmaelites bought Joseph from the Midianites, and they paid the same price as his former owners had given for him. Next, Joseph's three masters. End part 24 of 95, TheLegendsOfTheJews.com.